Welcome to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. Our goal is to help you maximize your church's potential. You'll hear from top leaders in children's, student, and family ministry about the principles and practices they use. Now here's your host, Nick Blevins.
Hello and welcome to episode 6 of the podcast. We have a great interview today with my friend Cindy Fiala. Cindy is the family pastor at Preston Trail Community Church in Frisco, Texas. Now, Cindy will be the first family pastor we have on the podcast. So this is a podcast about what I call family ministry, but I really just call it that because what I mean is children's ministry and student ministry. So we'll have leaders from kind of both worlds. And we'll also have people like Cindy, like myself, who their job is to lead from birth through high school or birth through college, something like that. And so that's Cindy's role there, and we'll hear from her today. And there's some great things you'll get out of this interview. She also shares some documents and resources regarding the way she leads her team, which I think is kind of unique. And you can get all of that in the show notes at nickblevins.com/episode 6. You'll want to subscribe because we have some great interviews coming up that you don't want to miss. Ones that I've already recorded, but can't wait to share with you. We talked to Chris Wesley, who serves at a Catholic church right near me, kind of in my backyard here. And I've known Chris and some other staff of the church for a while. And I'm telling you, I think it might be the best Catholic church in the world. And I know that sounds crazy, but here's what I know. This church has really done some amazing things to reach people who are not a part of any church. They have changed and tweaked and did all kind of things that maybe you don't think about when you think of a Catholic church. And so you don't want to miss that. We talked to Amy Fenton from Orange, and we talk about the Live to Serve conference that they do for children's ministry volunteers. And we also talk about VBS. We talked to my friend Kevin Monahan from 12 Stone Church. Kevin's the family pastor there. That's a church of about 18,000 with 8 or 9 locations. And you'd be surprised at how that's led from a family ministry and a children's ministry perspective. So you don't want to miss that. Those interviews are recorded and ready to share with you, but we also have some that are scheduled to be recorded this summer that I'm really excited about. We're going to talk to Kristen Ivy from Orange, and we'll talk about Phase. If you haven't heard of that, go to justaphase.com. Just a great project they've been working on to help parents and church leaders connect with kids at every phase and see the uniquenesses there and help serve them as best they can. And then I'm excited because I'm going to have an interview with a great mentor and church leader and someone who really helped me get this podcast started, someone you know and whose podcast I hope you listen to, and that's Carrie Nieuwhof. Yep, we're going to interview Carrie Nieuwhof on here. We'll talk about Carrie's latest book, Lasting Impact, and we'll also talk about what pastors want their children's pastors or student pastors or next-gen pastors to know. So I'm really excited to talk with Carrie, and we'll record that later in the summer. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of them. But let's go ahead and jump into my interview now with Cindy Fiala. Cindy, it's great to have you on the podcast today. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for asking me. I'm super excited to talk with you.
Great. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, and your church, and your role at your church.
Yeah, so I am the family pastor at Preston Trail Community Church. That's in Frisco, Texas, which is just north of Dallas. We're in the DFW area. And we started out, it's kind of a cool story. We started out as a plant in an AMC theater doing only FX. So we are a huge family development kind of community, and our 2 senior pastors wanted to target families. And so that's how we started. So we very much have this genesis of family ministry at our church. So that's pretty fun. Now
Can I pause you just for a second? So FX, in case somebody doesn't know what that is, that's kind of interesting. I haven't really heard that before. So tell us a little bit about like what FX is. And I know North Point did something similar because didn't they have like normal services one week and FX the next or something like that? But tell us what that is and what that looked like.
Okay. So an FX is a family experience. Basically, the idea is kind of like if you think about Disney makes these amazing movies that communicate to the parents at a high level and communicates to a child at a lower level. And everybody's enjoying the experience at the same time. An FX, or family experience, is really designed to get families in the same room at the same time so that they can have continual spiritual conversations during the week. So it gives them a good context of which to talk about as they're driving, home or at watching TV or eating dinner. So that's what a family experience is. So our church was started with a family experience, and now we we recently built a new building about 18 months ago, and we've gone from about 1,500 to we're averaging about 3,700 every weekend. So that's pretty incredible.
And did you grow that much just in that like move in the building time, like 2 years or 3 years or something like that?
Yes.
Wow, that's fast.
Yeah,
That's a lot of change in a short time.
it's a lot of change. And I think we did a really good job preparing for it. But, there's always things that you have to turn those dials to make sure that we have enough room and our processes are working. So it's been a really fun adventure. So as a family pastor, I lead a team of amazing leaders. I call them thoroughbreds because they're all just amazing in their own right. And I feel some days I come home and I go, I don't even know why I get to do what I do, but I'm pretty thankful for it. So early childhood, which for us is preschool, elementary, middle school, and high school. And we're strategizing right now about a college ministry, a next step for our students that are graduating from high school. So that's a team that I lead. And I have a staff of about 20, including our interns.
Cool. Okay. And that's today, that's primarily what we're going to talk about is family ministry. Like, what does it look to have one unified family ministry? And what does it look like to lead that as a family pastor? But one other quick question. How long did you guys do the FX before you launched into, normal Sunday services or, whatever you would call that?
Mm-hmm. So we did FX for, I may get this wrong because I wasn't here then. But I think it was for 3 years. But during that time, they also launched adult services. So we moved from the AMC Theater after a couple of years into a temporary building that we purchased. It was really small. And here's one of the things that I love to tell people. It was literally a manufacturing building that we retrofitted to be a church. And we would tell people, hey, if you love Home Depot, you're going to love our church.
Nice.
Because it was cement floors and it wasn't anything fancy. But I'm telling you, if you have an imagination, you can do ministry anywhere, right? I mean, we know. So that's been fun. So it's been fun to go from that building into this new building that we were able to create from the ground up. But what's really fun is we all agreed that, gosh, there were so many elements from that old building that people loved because it wasn't it didn't feel too fancy.
Yeah.
They could feel like they were themselves and be real. And so we put a lot of those elements in the new building, even though it was brand new. So it's kind of fun.
That's cool. So a question I get a lot is, what is family ministry? What does it look like to have that all under one umbrella? And especially what, as a family pastor or a next gen pastor, what do you do? Like, what does your role look like? I get that question a lot because it feels like this is so new. So how would you answer that? What does your role look like? And what do you do as the family pastor?
Yeah. It's interesting because I get that question a lot too. And what I do is as I was thinking about this question, it's kind of like I've got this big map laid out and I'm mapping our next steps. So as a family ministry, we want to make sure that we have a strategy. It's not just an umbrella. And I think that's where sometimes when people think about family ministry, there's a lot of different ideas that people have. Some people think that family ministry is just early childhood and elementary. Some people think that it's just parent ministry or maybe marriage. For us, it encompasses everything. So a child from child dedication when they're first born, all the way through graduation and beyond, and including marriage ministry. So it's not just an umbrella. For us, what it means is that we have a strategy of how parents and children will move from one phase or age and stage to another, because kids all learn at different rates, and there are certain things that they can absorb at certain rates. There are different things that parents go through at each one of those phases too. So for us, and for me as a family pastor, I'm kind of looking at it from 30,000 feet, and I do not live in the weeds. So I don't run weekly ministry anymore. I used to. I was in children's ministry for years, but I don't live in that world anymore. I'm very much higher than that, looking at, okay, where are we now and where do we need to go? And then kind of working backwards with my team, going, number one, is this direction that I feel like we need to go? Is it right? Is it true? Is it true north? And so we do everything very collaboratively, and then we make the decisions about what we need to do to hit our goal. And so some of those things, it's about partnering with parents. We think that's a really big deal. It's about scope and sequence. It's about transitions. Do we have good transitions between every one of our ministries? Are we leading parents to be the spiritual influencer in their kids' lives? And the other thing for us is our marriages. Are we being a champion of marriages? Because we all know that if a kid comes from a family that has a really strong set of parents with a really strong marriage, they're just going to grow up to be more emotionally healthy, and they're going to have a greater ability to grasp certain things. When we talk about the gospel and how, in Ephesians 5, how Paul says, this thing about marriage, I'm paraphrasing, but this thing called marriage, it really is, what we're really talking about is Christ and the church. And it's part of that mystery. And so will a kid really understand that? Will a parent even really understand that? What the gospel means at its very core, unless they understand it even at that level. So we take this really huge kind of blanket and we go, okay, someone's got to be kind of the guardian of that. And I would say that's what I am more than anything, is I'm the guardian of our strategy, and I'm a guardian of where our families and our kiddos are going from phase to phase.
That's good. Now, I know for us, there is that element of partnering with parents, and we do that so many different ways in children's ministry and student ministry, but there are also, kind of like you mentioned, the need to serve parents and marriages, and maybe that could look like any number of things between classes or seminars and things like that. And for us at our church, I know it's a partnership between us and kind of our Connect team, small groups, because they do most of those kinds of things. And the older we get as a church, the more all of that is coming under what I would say the family ministry side. So on my team and our roles, but at your church, is all of that under your leadership, or is it a little bit of a partnership? Because I think a lot of churches have that same experience. It could be we serve kids and students over here and we're one team, but how we serve marriages is completely disconnected, and then it feels disconnected.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. We definitely partner. We partner with our groups team, and we're the same way. We feel like, because they live in that world of adults and we live in the world of kids, but we kind of cross over because of this parent partnership. And so I lead with our groups pastor, our marriage ministry, and we do it through groups, but we also do it through a weekly marriage ministry that's called Reengage. And man, if you want to know anything about that, you can go to Watermark or marriagehelp.org. It's a great, great, great program that you don't have to reinvent anything. They've done all the hard work for us, and you literally can start it in your church after a few months. And the good thing for us that we love about it is that we have a weekly answer for any couple that calls. Whether it's they just need to go from good to great, they just need a little tune-up, maybe something's just a little off, or they're in deep need of complete resurrection. Everybody, that's our answer for almost every couple initially. And so you can hear more about that at marriagehelp.org.
We'll link to that in the show notes on the blog. That'll be really helpful. Is that like a series of classes? Is it content? Is it like a mix? So like somebody asks, hey, we need help and here's where we are. What does it point them to?
Yeah. So it's all built around a groups model, but it also, in children's ministry and student ministry, we're all about the power of the and. It's large group and small groups. And that's what this is too. It's a come and gather moment. So it's worship, and they'll hear a story from a couple that have gone through Reengage, and then they break up into small groups. So it's both. And they'll go through a series of 16 lessons once they get into a closed group. That takes them through everything from God's design for marriage, communication, forgiveness in action, intimacy. I mean, the gamut. And so it's an intense kind of moment. So it's really good.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of churches are probably trying to integrate that, right? But maybe could really use something like that from the outside where they don't have to build it from scratch. I'm a big fan of not building from scratch. And so it sounds like that's a good thing that already exists that they could use at their church.
Yeah.
That's helpful. So in terms of your role, you're trying to stay 30,000 foot view. Like you said, you're kind of a guardian, watching the map, making sure it all works together. So what does that look like during the week? In a typical week, I think it's easy to imagine what a schedule is like if you're leading children's ministry or student ministry. All of us can kind of picture like what that looked like for us in those seasons. But what does your week look like leading the entire family ministry from that 30,000 foot perspective?
Yeah. So it's a lot of great conversations. We meet as a team together every Monday morning, just kind of a tactical meeting, just to see, hey, how was your weekend? Because I can't be all places at all times. And we do have Saturday and Sunday services. So to hear from our entire team on Monday morning, just what their wins are, and maybe even where they're stuck or they need help from somebody else on the team. So we have conversations like that. And then the rest, I kind of swim in a couple of different pools. So I definitely swim in this family ministry role, but family ministry itself. But I also sit at the senior leader table. And so I'm part of the team that kind of leads our whole church. So Mondays are devoted strictly to family ministry. I'll meet with my teams. We'll meet, we do some book studies because we're a huge learning culture here. So I love to take our team through a study together where we're learning together. And then on Tuesdays, I'm drilling down on a kind of even higher level church business. So that's when I meet with our senior leader team, and lots and lots of conversations. Wednesdays and Thursdays, I try to connect with each one of my team members. And so I would say for me, it's a lot of meetings. It's a lot of great conversations. But what that does for me on the weekend is that I get to connect with families, and I get to get lots of knee hugs from kids and high fives from students and talking with students and sitting down with students. So I would say that it's a lot of conversations.
Yeah. And I think that's typical too. Even, some of it is based on church size, but almost at any church size, I think the role of a family pastor or next gen pastor is a lot of meetings, because it's a lot of getting a lot of teams to work together, planning and all of that kind of stuff. And I would say something you kind of talk through there, I don't know if this is intentional or not, but that's something I've learned from other people, that to help them be productive during the week and manage their time well, they have themes around their days. And it sounds like you do too. I even read an article this year in the business world, how some, business people that are owners of companies and, multiple companies, that's one of the ways that they stay sane is they have themes for their days and they focus on that. It sounds like you do that too. Is that intentional, or is it just kind of work out that way?
It's totally intentional. I work in patterns really well. And so I one of the things that has been really super helpful for me, and I think this is helpful for anybody, regardless of where you lead or what level you lead at, is I I try to keep one day out of my work week without anything scheduled. And I even try not to be at the church. I work off site so that I can devote that day to researching, to reading, to having conversations with other ministry leaders. So it's basically a creative day where I can get my hands on the pulse of, okay, what's going on in our culture? What's going on? What do I have to be aware of as a leader? And I think everybody needs that. We can't be so deep in the weeds all the time that we never come up for air, and all of a sudden we realize we're grounded, on a sand spit or something that we haven't been navigating well. And so I think it's really important to do that. So I'm not able to do it every week, but most weeks I'm able to do that.
Yeah, I like that too. That's like my Monday is, I work from home. I usually don't have meetings, and that is really, really helpful because then you get to get in on Tuesday and sometimes it's just a blitz and everything else takes over. Yeah. Now in your ministry, was it always one team, or was there a point when it was children's ministry and student ministry and it had to be kind of combined? Because that's another question I get a lot too is, how do you transition? This family ministry model, I think a lot of people like it. It's very appealing. Obviously, you can see all the benefits, but they're asking that question, how do I transition to it? So did you have to transition to it, or was it always that way?
Well, it's an interesting question because we've definitely transitioned over the last 5.5 years. But I would say that it's been the goal since the very beginning. So when I first got here, there wasn't much structure at all, and so it wasn't transitioned into family ministry just because there wasn't any structure. And so it was almost kind of like having a blank canvas where we could go, okay, asking my senior pastors, what is it that you want? That's what they wanted. They wanted a strategy, and being able to go, okay, great. And they said, paint the colors, here's the keys to the kingdom, go and do it. And so we knew that was the goal the entire time. We were really building kind of from the ground up. So when I first got here, I lived in children's world for about a year and a half until we got that going. Our student ministry had gone through some interesting transitions, and so they were really rebuilding also. And so over the course of time, over these last 5.5 years, knowing that's our goal, that's what we've been working toward this whole time. So it wasn't hard to transition. Number one, it wasn't hard to transition because everybody on the staff knew that was the direction we were going in. And it was being led by our senior leaders, which is huge.
Yeah, definitely. Even if you're transitioning, it has to come from the top, right? If it doesn't get supported from top leadership, it's probably not going to work well.
It's going to be really difficult. Yeah, I think it's going to be really difficult. So for us, it was less of a transition and more of creating. We really kind of built it from the ground up, and that was great for us. At about the 4-year mark, I remember we had it was a little after. It was after we were in our new building. On one particular Sunday, I was just walking around as I do, kind of, telling our volunteers thank you and talking to people. And I looked around and I went, "This is it. The plan has come together." And so, there's so many times, especially in ministry, where we just keep our heads down and we just keep doing the work. And we don't look up long enough to go, how many miles have we walked? And man, that moment I looked up and it was like this beautiful thing. Our teams were clicking. It was working. And so my encouragement for leaders out there is, number one, don't set yourself up to think that you're going to be able to create this or transition it or whatever it is in 12 months. you just won't be able to do that.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if I would put an end date on it, but I would make my steps along the way, knowing what your end goal is. Okay, knowing that and seeing the gap where we are from here, what are the things that I need to do? What are those incremental steps? Because many times it's just those mini steps, those incremental steps that we take that take us a mile rather than just a couple feet, right?
Yeah.
So if you can determine where your gap is and then make your plan to hit your goal, you will. And so we talk a lot about dials and what are the dials on our dashboard that we need to keep watching. And so those are some of the things that I watch every week. And those are a lot of the conversations that I have every week. Hey, this dial looks like that volunteer dial. It can sneak up on you. You can have a great full team and your benches are loaded. And all of a sudden, just because of attrition or, summer came or, whatever it is, all of a sudden, as a student pastor or a children's pastor, you look up and you go, where's my team? Well, if we haven't been watching that dial all the time, then all of a sudden you look up and you begin to panic. So that's one of my jobs. I just watch dials to make sure, and I ask the questions. How are we doing here? How are we doing here? How are we doing here? Are we doing anything here? Because they're so busy in the weeds.
Yeah. And I know one thing that makes me think about too is leading family ministry. A lot of people are transitioning. So you got to start off with somewhat of a blank page, but you still had to build a lot of it. But a lot of leaders are transitioning, and so there's more work than there is hours in the week. They can't even imagine. But I can see too where a family pastor, next gen pastor might think, okay, once I get it where I want it to be, like that moment that you had, where you walked around and it was like, this is what we were going for. This is great. I think you would say there's always work to be done because you're always watching the dials. You're always working towards alignment. It's not like you've arrived and now you can do a different job.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think at those first 4 years, that was definitely what we were doing. We were building it up. We were building teams. We were building systems and processes. We were building transitions. But there's always that other thing like, okay, what about a great transition between fifth grade, and for fifth grade is the end of elementary for us, so fifth grade and middle school. Do we have anything for that? Do we even have milestones? How are we really partnering with parents other than just giving them a take-home page at the end of the day that as a leader, when you walk out in the parking lot, you see them flying around, and you're all,
on the floor, floor of the car, floor of the church building. Yeah.
Right. So there's more ways to do that, but until you get certain things done, until you get your foundation built, and even the walls up, you can't begin to decorate, right? So you have to do that structural work first. And that's a lot of vision casting. It's that's how you transition. Transitions aren't just about building a team and building processes. It's about vision casting and changing mindsets and examining culture. I mean, am I trying to make this fit into a culture that this will never fit in this particular model? So I think one of the things that, the dangers that we can fall into as leaders is looking at some place like, North Point or Willow Creek or, whatever, and go, oh, I want my ministry to look just like that. Well, if you let's say you live in the Pacific Northwest and you're trying to build a North Point model that's in Atlanta, Georgia, there are some things that are not going to translate. And so you've got to be a student of your culture, and you need to be a student of your parents and where are they busy and what are they doing? Or if you're in the Midwest and you've got your churches filled with people that are farmers, I mean, how are you reaching them? You can't just take something and plug it in. So these are the things that I think take the time. I mean, we can build systems and processes and teams even really quickly, But to transition and to create, that takes time of casting vision and being able to articulate the why and what it's going to mean to that family.
Yeah. And I imagine, and like even with you building it, not necessarily transitioning, it's a lot of conversations with staff and then conversations with volunteers and then conversations with families, right? You have to almost build it from the inside out to build it the right way, to get everybody on board at the right time, to carry that vision. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, something else I know you've been working on. So you've already felt like you've kind of built it the way you want to build it, but you're always working on it. And you've even done restructures within your staff team to help make it more integrated, even beyond just, hey, I lead it and, we're all on one team. What are some things you're doing there that have been helpful?
Yeah. So part of our culture at Preston Trail, because I've said this a couple of times, we have 2 senior pastors. So neither of them are an associate pastor. They are they co-pastor our church. So from the very, very genesis of our church, we have this integration model where we're working together. We try to integrate between ministries. And so recently in January, we launched Saturday services. We had gotten to the point on our Sunday services really for kids ministry where we just didn't have any more space. And so we needed to do something. And after a lot of prayer for many, many months in 2015 and strategizing, we made the decision to start 2 Saturday services. So that gave me kind of this new, I would say, challenge in the most positive way, because I love a challenge, of rethinking how we did team. We very much are a culture for serving where it's all gift based. So we're very, very careful about this idea that Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians 12, where he talks about the body being made up of many parts, right? And so we take that seriously, and we know that when we have the right people on the right seat of the bus doing the things that they're gifted in, that A, they're going to love it. They're going to be there for longevity. And B, our kids are going to love it. And even outside of family ministry, anybody else in the church. So we've got guys that just love the parking lot, the parking lot ministry that we have. And we have coffee makers, and they get to be baristas, and, they are talking to people and making stuff. And so I just got thinking, as we had this opportunity, we were going to hire new staff members to staff our Saturday service. So we approached Saturday like it was a multi-site plant or a multi-site church, where it really is another campus for us, so that we didn't wear our current team out. So we were going to make some hires, and as I was thinking through that, it just dawned on me that as much as we work so hard to get our volunteers on the right seat of the bus using their gifts and their talents, we hadn't been that intentional with our staff and the family ministry staff in particular. And so I had people that, and everybody that's listening to this probably gets it. You wear 6 to 12 different hats.
Yeah.
You're the curriculum person, you're the packaging person, you're downloading videos into ProPresenter, you're building sets, and then there's recruiting team members and training them and all that. And so I got looking at our team, and like I said, I've got this amazing team of people that God has assembled, and they are very, very good at, just like I am, and just like you are, at certain things. And so we began to have conversations around what if, what would it look like if we, instead of had this lineal org chart, it looked more like a lazy river.
That sounds fun. Sounds a lot more fun than an org chart. That's for sure.
I know, right? So I think in pictures anyway. So I'm like, what if we were all, floating in this lazy river, and within that lazy river, we're all working together. And this is early childhood team all the way through high school team. Okay. And because we all do the same things, we just do it differently. We all do small groups. We all do large group.
Yeah.
We all
have resources and administrative stuff and probably do events. Yeah.
Yes, we all do the same things. They just look different. And everybody has these gifts. And so as we begin to talk about it and kind of dream about it, we all decided that let's give this a try. So what we've done now is we have two directors over elementary, and we have two directors over early childhood. And we have two pastors in student ministry. So they, on the weekends, if you imagine this big lazy river and there's 4 gates on it where you can get off, they get off at their appropriate gate on the weekends, and they're playing in that gate with their teams on the weekend. But during the week, they're working with a team or on their team in their own weeds in one particular area. For instance, we have 4 different buckets of things that we've identified that each of us do. There's a programming bucket, there's a team or volunteer bucket, there's a content or curriculum bucket, and then there's a parent bucket. So everybody works during the week in one of those buckets. If a couple times a year, we do all church series. So what that means is what the adults are learning, we're going to pour all the way down into our itty bitties. So we write our own curriculum, we write our own scripts, we come up with our series for our students. So now, instead of everybody kind of doing that independently, everybody who works on content and curriculum and programming are going to come together and go, okay, this is our topic. This is how we're going to approach it. And here's how it's going to look in early childhood, in elementary, and in students. And will it look different? Yes, because we're communicating to different ages. But there's a common thread that now a parent can talk to their children about around the lunch table after church on Sunday, or at dinner after church on Saturday, or during the week. Hey, this is what Pastor Jim talked about to us this weekend. What did you guys learn about that? Whatever. It's made it easier now. We don't have to create an additional team to kind of go in this direction. They already have it. And now they can also strategize between 1 or 2 ministries or all 3 ministries. Hey, we're doing a big, we call missions at our church, we call it compassion. So we're doing a big compassion drive. We want all of our families, because we have a lot of families that have kids, believe it or not, in every single ministry. And so it makes it, what we realized is that we had all these competing resources. We had competing resources for families. So a parent would maybe have 3 different topics that they would have to remember to talk to each one of their kids about during the week. Well, now we're going, okay, well, yeah, this is how this conversation can be for you, parent of student, for you, parent of an elementary kiddo, and for you, parent of an itty bitty. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible for parents. So that's kind of how that works. We've done this since January now. And last week it was so fun, and it was so great. I love it when a plan comes together. One of my elementary directors came up to me, who works, she's the team, the volunteer liaison for elementary ministry for both Saturday and Sunday. That's the water she swims in. That's what she does all week long. So she recruits, she trains. She doesn't do all the training. She she develops the training to make sure that everybody else on the team has the training for elementary. But she came up to me and she said, I have to tell you that I was a little worried at first when we went to this new model, but I have to tell you, I love my job. She said, it wasn't that I didn't love it before, but I just realized that the things that did kind of de-energize me were the things that I'm not really gifted in. And so now I'm just swimming in the water that I'm gifted in, and I love it. So that was a huge thing and a huge confirmation. And so we're still tweaking and we're still fiddling with it.
Yeah, and for her, she gets to do more of what she likes, and somebody else, I would imagine, is doing what she didn't like as much, and it's something they like more.
Yes,
right.
Yes,
yeah. So
absolutely.
And I'm sure everybody still has to do some things that they don't love. That's just part of it, right? You always have a piece of that, but you've kind of created this new structure so that people are doing far more of what they love and what they're good at, and less of what they're not so good at. That's really helpful. If we can, in the show notes too, maybe we'll even kind of display it there in a way that people could picture that too. But it seems like it's mostly just about people lead their specific areas, and in the environments on Saturday nights or Sundays, that's where they are. They're leading in their environment. But during the week, they serve on multiple teams, their own based on age group, and then these other specific teams and focuses with the buckets that you mentioned. That's really helpful. And I'm sure it's also helped your team feel like one team even more, right?
Well, yes. And so for me as a family pastor, that's my main goal. How do we continue to fight against silos? How do we continue to draw the net and bring us in, not only for our team, because I'm sure other family pastors or next gen pastors out there feel this too, but there's just this idea about church, especially for people who've been in church for a long time. Oh, children's does one thing, students does another thing. It's very segregated. And so even for us to continue to draw the net closer and to create more common language around family ministry, that we are one ministry, we're not three separate ministries. That's helpful for the congregation. It's helpful for the rest of our staff. And it helps us to be more united. So, I mean, that's a huge part of it, right? Is unity. And so if we're working as a team on these other kind of ministry buckets, then there's never competing resources because we're all for each other. It's not, oh, you're taking my volunteer or you're doing this thing when I'm trying to do this thing. I mean, we're trying to eliminate all that sideways energy.
That's good. That's really good. And that's what we all want. We all want one team, working together. That'd be really helpful. Well, unfortunately, we're running out of time here because we have another topic that we want to talk about. I do want to give a little bit of time here at the end just to get your thoughts on it a bit, because we've been in some conferences together in different environments where we talk about women in leadership and what does it look like to lead on staff in a church as a woman, and what are some ways, and this is where I love hearing you and others talk about this because I feel like we don't do it well. I mentioned, before to you that there was a study this year about how youth pastors and their salaries, and it had a bunch of information about that. And I don't remember the exact number, but I want to say it was like the average male student pastor made 40 something thousand, and the average female student pastor made 20 something thousand, which is just ridiculous. It's crazy, and I wouldn't be surprised that there would be some gap there because I feel like we are still needing to make more progress, but. That's huge. And there's just so many other ways too, in which we don't do that well as a church. We don't set women up to lead well. So what would you say to people who are listening right now? Either it's women who are leading, or it's pastors, staff who have women on their staff who are leading. How can we do that better?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously I'm passionate about this. Here's where I think it comes down to is I think we can do it better by just realizing that God has given spiritual gifts to everybody. And when we disallow women to be in leadership roles or to teach, we're only hearing from half the church. So, when I look at the way Jesus revolutionized um, reality for women. And so I think it's less about gender, it's more about gifts, and it's empowering the church body to function in its full form. I think that some of the things that be we need to be very aware of is there's one of the things that I've realized. I mean, I'm older, and so I back in the day there was never a platform for women to learn how to speak and how to teach, in front of people. And so I think as leaders now, we need to be very aware of the young women that are in our on our staffs. I mean, we have some amazing, incredible women that can teach just incredibly on our church staff, and they do. And so I think that we need to give, especially young women, the opportunity, give them a platform to be better at it. So what does that look like? I think it looks like in student ministry, we allow women to teach in student ministry. I think we allow women to teach more than just in women's ministry. Can women teach to couples? But I think that I think that leadership has to get around that idea that everyone is given the gifts of teaching and leading and all those kind of things. So I talked to a really strong leader at a big church that we would all know a couple of years ago, and I was just asking her kind of about gender roles and stuff because it was something that I was trying to work out too. And she said, Cindy, it's weird because we don't even think about gender. It's more about leadership, and it's more about the role. And so I do think that sometimes, especially in the church, and I understand it, I'm not judging, I'm not saying anything wrong about anything, but I understand why we've had to get here, but we have blurred the line when it comes to women, thinking that there's always this danger of sexuality. And so I think that we need to stop sexualizing male and female, especially in leadership roles. If we've set up really good structure, if we've set up good boundaries through values and the way we operate as a staff and as people in general, then we're going to self-regulate ourselves, and we're going to hold ourselves accountable automatically. There's this beautiful thing that, again, back in Ephesians 5, the very beginning of Ephesians 5, it talks about mutual submission, right? And so, yes, he's talking about marriage, but I think the same thing holds true in leadership when it comes to male and female. There's this mutual respect and submission that we can give to each other. I so respect and submit to the leadership of my church, of my pastors. They also, I'll never forget this, when I was hired here, one of our senior pastors says, "Man, we're going to learn so much from you."
That's good. Yeah.
That's
honoring.
Yes. And so can we just say, "Man, you bring gifts to the table that I don't have, and I'm excited to learn from you," rather than going down that road to possibly, this could get sideways. And man, I think we can just guard ourselves against that in some really practical ways.
Yeah, and like you're saying, you can absolutely have guardrails in relationships to guard yourselves and have women leading the same as men. It's just, you're right. Sometimes, I don't know if it's intentional or what, but we let that almost be an excuse. Like maybe these three guys from the leadership team are going out to lunch and they're going to have conversations about the church and leadership and important things. And they don't invite the one or two ladies who are also on the leadership team, because of that whole gender thing. But the truth is they could totally invite them, or if it's a conversation that is going to be one-on-one, they could have, you could have it at, at the office or at the church, whether people are around. It's definitely not an excuse that we should let get in the way of that. And sometimes, so it's almost like there are two camps, because I think, in the sense that, yes, there are some people who theologically, they're not viewing it the way that you're talking about. They're limiting a little bit of what women can do in terms of gifts, abilities, roles, theologically. And that's absolutely true. Some churches do that. But I also feel like I see churches who it's really not an issue theologically. It's almost like it's happening. I don't know, maybe because they're not intentional about it. I'm not sure what it is. I don't feel like it's a concerted effort to not let women lead. It's like these other things that happen almost by accident. Like we don't ask them to, or like you mentioned, the teaching thing. We don't intentionally get them in environments where they can teach. We were together recently where somebody talked about we should do that well with high school girls and college age girls, so just like we do with up and coming student pastors who are male, right? Give them shots to teach. So have you seen that too, where some churches, it's not really like a theological thing. It's not even an intentional thing. It just kind of happens.
Yeah. And so it's interesting to me because probably in most of our churches, except for very rural churches, you've got women in your congregation. You've got women that are coming that are leading at very high levels in the corporate world. That, I mean, they're leading, they're teaching, they've got great communication skills, they've got great leadership skills, and we're not embracing that. It's like it's okay in the corporate world, but not in church world. And I do think a little bit of it, I agree with you, Nick. I think that there are two camps. I think maybe part of it could be, and I don't even want to, I don't really know, but I do feel like what I've seen in the past is that there are churches that, hey, this is the way we've always done it. Yeah. And it might upset the apple cart too much if we allow that. And yet, if we're going to be visionary leaders at the highest level and go, okay, how are we going to, yes, our main goal, we all want to reach more men because women naturally come more than men do. But how are you communicating to those women out there that are leading at very high levels? How are you doing that? Are you communicating to them like, I don't even want to say how, but I do think that there's an audience that not only we need to be prepared as we're looking forward, because more women, I just read an article recently or a statistic recently that said more females are graduating from college. So pretty soon, very soon, we already are in an age and an era where we have equal amount of men and women in the workplace, in corporate levels, and doing really amazing work. So we can't just now, if we're going to communicate to the whole church, then we need to make sure that we're doing that with both voices.
Yeah. And I think, again, like sometimes it is intentional. It's either theological or, like you said, they're scared to change. Mm-hmm. I grew up in a church that my father-in-law actually was the pastor at the time, and he transitioned our church to having female deacons, which was new. And even as I was probably 20 years old or something at the time. So my wife and I were dating. We weren't married, and I remember another guy in the church. He was younger. He's a little older than me, but he talked about how much this was wrong. And you could tell his dad, who was right there, had that same opinion, had no idea there was a female deacon in the Bible named Phoebe. You know what I mean? So you bring that up and it's like, you know what? You weren't really theologically against it. You were just sort of raised that way and you really didn't even know any better. And that is part of it. That's true too. And I feel like on the other hand, for churches that it's not really a theological thing, I wonder if it is that nobody's championing it more. It's almost like it just goes unchecked. And I'm sure it's hard. Maybe you could speak to this, but it's harder to champion it as the woman because people might look at you the wrong way. Like, oh, wait a minute, you're making this an issue. Truth is, it is an issue, and somebody needs to stand up and fight for it. And maybe that's what it is. Maybe guys, maybe we need to fight for it, regardless of what our role is, in the church, and fight for making sure that we're leading men and women the same way and giving them the same opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to make it a gender thing. I really don't,
Yeah.
because I don't look at it as a gender thing. I do look at it as the whole church. When we go back to Genesis, the scripture tells us he made them male and female, and we were made in his likeness.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
not a half likeness or a quarter likeness.
Yeah, and it's not a half likeness. It's not any of that. So I have to believe that, he created us to represent him together. I mean, we see that in marriage. But this is the whole church. The whole church is male and female. And so I do think that it's a powerful thing when I can speak from my own perspective. When I was hired here at Preston Trail, I've got 2 senior leaders that it's not about gender. You're the right person for the job with the right skills, the right gifts, and so come along for the ride.
Yeah, they didn't let that get in the way. That's good.
It's so empowering for me. Now, and I can say this because we've had these conversations in public. Do we still have conversations about, hey, it's not, we do everything together as a senior leadership team. And so there's never been any exclusion of things, but there are certain things that, we would just never do. Like, I would never go to breakfast with one of my senior leaders by myself. Right.
Yeah.
But they could invite one of the male leaders, and it's okay. It's not, I don't get all jacked up about that. It's okay. But what's been really interesting is that, and this is going to sound so weird, but I know everybody out there listening is going to get it. The part that we've actually had conversations about, kind of joking, but kind of not, is our bathrooms are really close to each other. And so you can kind of hear, conversations, from one bathroom to another. And we'll leave a meeting and the guys will go into the bathroom and they'll finish the conversation in there.
That's funny. That's kind of funny that you have to set up. A lot of things could go wrong with that, of course.
And it's not like you can hear every detail, but you can hear enough to go,
yeah.
Oh, wait, I want to be a part of that conversation. And so, we joked about it. It's like, guys, you just finished that conversation in the bathroom. And so now it's one of those jokes. Okay, we're not finishing any conversations in the bathroom.
Yeah.
It's like, great.
Let's finish them in the meeting, not the meeting after the meeing.
Yeah.
Even if it's in the bathroom.
We have such a great relationship with, our whole team. It's a beautiful thing. But, those are just things that I think that's a good example of ways we can be cognizant of how we're excluding. And honestly, as a woman, we can come off really strong, and we can come off being, people can label it feminist or whatever. And it's not. I just want to put a word of warning out there to every woman leader. Don't make it about gender.
That's good. Yeah.
Make it about your gift and make it about what you bring to the table, because I think it causes such a division when we make it about gender. Jesus never made it about gender.
Yeah. And I would say for the guys, they got to fight for it, regardless of what your role is. I mean, obviously, if you're the lead pastor, or maybe you're the family pastor and you're treating staff differently based on gender or whatever, you have to fight for it. And I think be the guardian of it. Otherwise, it could just stay the same, and not because anybody's out to get someone, or even because they're doing it intentional. It's almost like the bathroom conversation. They're just not even thinking about it.
Right.
It's not on purpose, not trying to treat anybody differently. Just something like that happens, and nobody's watching out for it. So it's good for everyone to kind of look out for that and try to help change that for the future. That's good.
Yeah, and the last thing I would say, because I know we've gone over time, but as a woman in leadership, and to all the women that are out there leading, here's what I would say. Number one, unity trumps everything. So you've got to be the biggest champion for unity on your staff team. Number two, you have to be there's a huge amount of deposit that you will make when you show respect, and you not just show respect, but you are respectful to anybody. Not just to your senior leaders, but to anybody on your team. And then the last thing is, if you're going to lead, then do it. I think the biggest thing that men get worried about with women, and I've had a ton of these conversations, is she's going to come into my office and she's going to cry. She's going to get emotional. She's going to, whatever. If you're going to lead. And save your tears for somewhere else. There's appropriate times and there's inappropriate times. And in a leadership role, there are times when you're going to cry, but not when you're trying to lead. So if you're going to lead well. I loved Sherry Surratt and Jenny Ketron's book, Just Lead. That's one of the chapters that they talk about in there. They say, if you're going to do it, then bring it. Don't bring it partway. Don't be hesitant. Don't play like a girl. I mean, be a girl, but don't throw a ball like a girl. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. Get rid of that, kill that whole analogy or that phrase, because you're just going to lead. Just lead like the book says, right? Like anyone else. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you.
Lead.
That's good. That's really good. We'll link to that book in the show notes. That's good. Well, this has been really helpful, and we did go over time, but I'm telling you, I could have asked 50 more questions, both about the family ministry stuff and the women in leadership stuff. There's just so much good stuff there. So we'll probably just have to bring you back on. That's what we'll do. We'll just get you back on the podcast again in the future, and maybe we could dive into that stuff more. That's really helpful. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Cindy.
Hey, thank you for inviting me. I'd love to come back anytime.
Well, it was good to talk with Cindy. She's just an amazing leader, and I hope you got a lot out of that. She shared some resources that I will put in the show notes at nickblevins.com/episode 6 that are about how she leads her team and the structure and how they, build teams cross-functionally to work together and all of that. So you'll want to check that out. And I'd love for you to go on iTunes and leave a comment about the podcast and a rating there. That really helps get it in front of other people on iTunes if they're searching. So I really appreciate if you do that. And while you're there, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Next week, we'll have Chris Wesley on the podcast. Chris is the student pastor at a Catholic church up here near me. And they just do church differently than you probably think of when you think of a Catholic church. But we actually spend most of our time talking about a strategy for student ministry and really could apply to children's ministry as well. So be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Family Ministry Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. We hope this helps you maximize your church's potential. We would love to hear stories of how you apply what you've learned. You can do that by leaving a comment on iTunes or in the show notes at nickblevins.com.